Come on, church, let's give God some praise in the house today. I want to welcome all of our first-time guests. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Man, do I have any guys that were here yesterday? Did they make it? No, they didn't recover. I was with Alpha Men. We were playing flag football. I'm not going to talk about the referee that we had, because we did have a video. And if they did see the video, our team would have won. But we're just going to leave it right there. Yep. But it's all cool. We survived. We made it. And I am here today by the grace of God. So we thank God for that. And today we are starting a new series. I know it's in the middle of December, towards the end of the year. We only have a few more Sundays left. But I'm really excited for this series, The Gift of Wholeness, that we'll be starting today. Really just talking about some of our emotions and our feelings that seem to rise up during this holiday season. And the reason why we're doing this series is because it's been said that Christmas and this holiday season is known as what was said to be the great magnifier, the great magnifier. And really what all that means is that during the holiday season, whatever is going on in our lives just has a way of being magnified during this time of year. So, in other words, when things are great, it seems like Christmas just makes it even better. But when things are not so great, Christmas and the season just has a way of magnifying it, where now you feel even worse than how the year started to and began with. So, for instance, if you are super busy, super stressed out, leading up to the holidays, it just seems like everything just gets magnified. Where now, all of a sudden, you seem to be even more busier and even more stressed out during this time. If things are horrible or even challenging when it comes to your family or your relationship dynamics, it seems like all of the drama just got magnified during this time of the year. Because Christmas season magnifies all of this. If you've lost a loved one during this time, you felt the hole in your heart, but during this time, it seems like the hole just got even bigger. And the truth is, during this time, our emotion seems to be all over the place. We're trying to navigate, trying to make sense of it, but we become aware of it because it's being magnified during this time here. So this is why we're going to end the year out talking about in this series and experiencing freedom and healing as we're getting ourselves ready and prepared for 2025. We're going to be talking about some painful emotions and feelings that we have on the inside of us, and we're going to be starting today as we end the year out. You guys ready? So today, we're going to be in the book of Nehemiah. Yep, Old Testament, we're going to be in Nehemiah. Nehemiah chapter 4, starting off in verse 10. Nehemiah 4, verse 10. And it reads, Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there's so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. Also, our enemies said, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them and will kill them and put an end to the work. Verse 12, then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. Wherever you turn, they will attack us. Let's pray. Gracious God, we thank you for the time that we have to just be in worship. Thank you, Lord, for just your grace that overshadows us as we are getting ready to end 2024, going into 2025. Lord, we ask that your Spirit will do what he does best, which is heal, save, and deliver. In Jesus' name, amen. Today, I want to title the message, The Most Expensive Tool. The Most Expensive Tool. I think many of us can agree that in the world that we live in today, it's filled with different variations of deadly diseases. Especially after these last few years, we've been introduced to COVID. There's cancer, there's Ebola, there's AIDS. There's so many different variations of deadly diseases. But what I believe that one of the most deadliest disease that exists, and many people minimize it and tend to overlook it, that deadly disease is called discouragement. Someone say discouragement. Discouragement. The reason why I believe that discouragement is a deadly disease, make sure you're taking notes, because number one, it's a universal disease, meaning that everyone at one time or another will experience discouragement in their life, regardless of how gifted you are, regardless of where you live, regardless of how skillful you are, or who you're connected to or who you're not connected to. At one time or another, you will experience discouragement. I love it. Discouragement does not discriminate. Regardless of how much money you have, at one time or another, you will experience discouragement. But also, number two, it's not just universal. Discouragement is also recurring. Someone say recurring. Discouragement is recurring, meaning that once you encounter discouragement, you never graduate from discouragement. Just because you experience discouragement as a young individual doesn't mean that you'll not experience it when you get older. Because the truth is, when you look at discouragement, you can experience discouragement in one season of your life, and then you realize it comes back again in another season of your life, where you find yourself, you're wrestling with discouragement for 1 month, and then a couple months down the line, it comes right back and messes with you again. Because discouragement is recurring. It's a recurring deadly disease. But also, number three, discouragement is highly contagious. This right here, you have to be careful for. It is highly contagious. And some of us, you don't know how many people that has infected you with their discouragement. And on the flip side to that, you may not be aware of how many people you have infected with your discouragement. Because discouragement is contagious. Discouragement is looking for friends. Discouragement is looking to build a community. And this is why, friends, family, we've got to be intentional to guard our soul, to guard our thought process, to be aware of our emotions. Because what may start off as just you feeling downcasted or I'm just having a bad day. If you don't attend to those feelings and to those emotions, what starts off as a bad day will lead into discouragement. It leads into discouragement because discouragement is based off of a circumstance or a situation that happened or took place in your life. And if you don't attend to the discouragement as it lingers on in your life, it will become depression. And once it becomes depression, it's no longer about a particular situation or circumstance in your life. Now it becomes a way of living, a way of looking, a perspective that you have on life. But today, I'm not going to speak about depression. I'm going to leave that for next year as we start the year. But today, what I want to make sure that we understand is that though normally depression and discouragement are often connected, they are not the same thing. They're not the same thing. But what I will say is that discouragement often is the first step that leads you into depression. And people will experience different expressions when it comes to depression or when it comes to discouragement. But what I have realized, the longer I walk with the Lord and the more I have conversations with people, I am fully 100% convinced that discouragement is one of the enemy's greatest tactics against believers. His greatest tactic against believers. Here, let's take a look at Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 16. It says, in addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Many of us, we're familiar with this passage where Paul, in Ephesians 6, he's talking about putting on the full armor of God, putting on the helmet, the breastplate, and all of that. But here he says, you need the shield of faith to extinguish the fiery darts, or another translation says, the flaming arrows of the evil one. In other words, every day that you wake up, you've got to be aware, you've got to know that the enemy is always shooting arrows of discouragement, arrows of defeating thoughts into your life. And so the Apostle Paul, he steps in and he says that the only way that you can distinguish all these arrows of discouragement in your life that's coming towards you every day is that you need the shield of faith to always be up. And the reason why the enemy has resulted to just throwing arrows of discouragement at you and I, because the enemy realizes, you know what? I just realized I can't do anything about God's plan and God's purpose over their life. When it comes to the plan and the purpose of God over this child's life, it is secure, it is sealed. I cannot do nothing about it. So the enemy says, you know what? Since I can't change how God feels towards them, God's plan over their life, I might as well resort to discouraging them to the point of pursuing the plan and purpose over their life. If I can just get them to a place where they want to step outside of God's plan, step outside of God's purpose, step outside of God's will, if I can just get them to a place where they feel so discouraged that they stop moving in life, stop moving forward towards the purpose that God has over them. And it's sad, the amount of believers that I find that get so discouraged to the point that they leave their place of purpose. They abandon God's plan for their life. It's interesting how many people I'll find that they'll allow discouragement to push them outside of their marriage. They'll allow discouragement to push them outside of a job that God blessed them with. They'll allow discouragement to push them outside of a relationship that was ordained to be purposeful. All because they got discouraged and they gave up. The good news when it comes to discouragement is that discouragement is not final. It's not final. There is a cure for discouragement, which means that you don't have to sit and allow discouragement to distract you. Plans and the purposes that God has over your life. And this is what Nehemiah is confronting in this moment right now. So that we can understand really the context of what's happening here. Here, Nehemiah, he's leading this group of the Jewish nation back home. And they're just coming from Babylonian captivity. They were in Babylonian captivity for about 70 years due to their disobedience towards God. And they're coming back home. And as they're returning back home, they realize that the temple, they realize that all the walls is in utter shambles. Everything is destroyed. So when you read the book of Nehemiah, the book before Nehemiah is the book of Ezra. Ezra primarily talks about rebuilding the temple. Nehemiah talks about rebuilding the walls. And so when they start rebuilding the walls, they're excited. They see hope. There's excitement, there's fervor, there's zeal about this project because they see where this is going. They see the potential of what could take place. But after a while, as you continue reading this passage here in chapter 4, you begin to realize that they become discouraged. And it's interesting because many of us, we can attest to when you initially start something, when you get a new car, just the smell of that new car. Like everyone's on board. Everyone's like, hey, I'll take Monday to wash it. I'll take Tuesday to clean the vacuum, the inside. Like all the kids, oh yeah, we got a new car. Mommy, I'll make sure I won't drop nothing in the backseat. Everyone's on board. But the moment that new scent begins to wear off, that's the moment that discouragement begins to step in. What you'll find in chapter 4 is the same way they started off on the high note here, Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 6. So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, where the people worked with all of their hearts. And as you continue reading the story, what you realize is that the mood in the story begins to change towards discouragement. It starts off great, but then it changes because discouragement now sets in. So I want us to dive into this so that we understand how we become discouraged like the people of Israel in this place. Then I want us to see how Nehemiah responds to their discouragement and how many of us, we leave the door open for discouragement in our lives. You guys ready? All right, so we're really about to start now, okay? So, I still got time. So point number 1, fatigue leads to discouragement. Fatigue leads to discouragement. Here, we're in Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 10. It says, meanwhile, The people in Judah said, the strength of the laborers is giving out. It's giving out. In other words, the people have been working themselves to exhaustion. They are worn out mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. They are just drained. To kind of get the picture, this is how I felt after we played the game. Like I was limping into the house. Yeah. I was just talking to one of the guys, and I'm like, I had to be there for my team. But it cost me, yeah, it cost me. How many pills? I think I took like 700 milligrams. That's another topic. Here it is. They're drained out. And yet, here they are right there. And what's interesting is that in our culture today, it's normal to be drained out. It's normal to be exhausted. Like, we don't like to talk about it, neither do we like to admit it. And even for me, I take great pride in the work ethics that my parents instilled into me. They taught me how to work, and you rest when you get to heaven. Like that's been my mentality. So I keep on going and going and going and going and going. To the point, even now, to this day, I'm having a conversation with my dad. My dad would say, Jonah, I want to make sure you take advantage of every opportunity. Whenever someone calls you to preach, say yes. I'm like, man, all right. And the truth is, we live in a culture like this, where it's constantly pushing us to do more, to take on more, to keep going and going and going. And unfortunately, if we find ourselves amongst the wrong crowd, and we decide to be honest, we decide to be transparent and vulnerable, and you actually tell someone, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. This December right now, I don't know if I got it in me. You say that and you're honest, they'll look at you like you're crazy. What have you been doing? You only got 2 kids. Yeah, you go get 2 kids. They'll look at you like you're not productive, like you're a failure. And constantly just pushing you to keep going, doing more, thinking that you're going to be fine as long as you keep continuing, not realizing that your tiredness and fatigue is literally setting you up to walk you through the door of discouragement. And over the years, I've realized that people would come to me and say, Pastor, I think I should just quit. I should leave my family. I should just leave this job that I'm in, go into another city. And what I find that's very interesting is that a large percentage of people during this time, the problem that they're reacting to is not even the real problem. Because the real problem is that you are tired. The real problem is that you need to rest. You need to go somewhere and relax. Turn off your phone and relax. Because sometimes the most spiritual thing that you can do is to get some rest. The most spiritual thing you can do is to rest. And this is countercultural in our society. But the most spiritual thing you can do, go on vacation. Some of you just need to go sit at the beach. I know you may not have funds to go far. Just sit at the beach. Just sit. Because the truth is, we don't have like good Sabbath habits. We're not resting well. And because we're not resting well, we don't have good Sabbath habits. Tiredness and fatigue opens the door wide open so you can walk into a lifestyle of discouragement. Here it is. We're still in the same passage here. Nehemiah 4, verse 6, it says, so we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height. For the people worked with all their heart. I don't know if you caught it right here. It said they only built the wall till half its height. Why? Because discouragement normally sets in after you start. Discouragement sets in halfway through the process. Discouragement sets in after the wedding day. Discouragement sets in after you give birth. Discouragement sets in after you've committed. Discouragement sets in after the fact. Family, I want to make sure that we understand this. Because everybody really has a tendency to work hard whenever you start. Have a tendency to work hard in the beginning. Because in the beginning, that's when you start with all of your heart. That's what the text says. They started with all of their heart. Why? Because it's new, it's fresh, it's the noble thing to do, it's the kind thing to do. But after a while, when that new car smell begins to wear off, she stops putting the makeup on her face. Hey, that's your business. She stops doing all those things. After the fact, that's when you begin to realize, oh, no, this is going to require work. This is going to require my intentional involvement. And if you're not intentionally involved, discouragement will set in. This is why we tell couples that we counsel, we let them know that normally couples will get a divorce between year 5 and year 7. Year 5 and year 7. And if you don't get a divorce, you'll get what's called a 7-year itch. And the 7-year itch is basically where you now start experiencing marital dissatisfaction, where, man, that's, you still kiss the same way when we met. Like, our conversations hasn't changed. Like, there's nothing fruitful, there's nothing new that's stemming from our conversations. That's that 7-year itch. And it's not until the 7-year itch, that's when you realize, oh, no, this is not the honeymoon phase. Like, no, this marriage takes work. It's not just about love. Oh, I love you. It's not just yeah. You're going to actually need to put in work. And if you're not intentional, you will find yourself where tired and fatigue opens the door for you to walk into a lifestyle of discouragement. So, fatigue leads to discouragement. But also, number 2, frustration leads to discouragement. Frustration leads to discouragement. Still in the same passage, Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 10. It says, meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. Now, when you read this, I want you to hear, like, they're talking out of their frustration because they're disheartened, they're frustrated over what seems to be an impossible situation to them. I really want to make sure that we get the picture of what's taking place right here. Because guess what they're frustrated over? They see rubble. They see debris. And basically, when it comes to rubble, when it comes to debris, rubble is basically pieces of rocks. Debris is basically dried out mortar. All the stuff that comes from, building a wall. That is frustrating them. Friends, I want to make sure that we get this. They're rebuilding the wall, but now they're complaining about the junk and the leftovers from the project that they're actually working on. In other words, what this means is that they allowed the rubble to now become their focus, and because it has become their focus, it now frustrates them. They've lost sight of the bigger picture. They lost sight that this wall is going to represent our security. Now they focus on the smaller things, allowing the smaller things to be a source of distraction for them in comparison to the grand scheme. We're building a wall, rebuilding a wall. No, we want to focus on the small things. And friends, whenever you work on a project, whenever you have a goal in mind, you need to know, you need to expect that there will be some rubble. There will be some rubble. There will be some things that accumulate over time, some collateral, some side effects, some minor things will show up, some minor things will happen. But the problem is that some of us, we like to major in the minor things. Major in the minor details. We allow the small stuff to take precedence in our lives. It starts with the distractions from the bigger picture. The bigger picture, the calling, the purpose, the mission that God has placed over your lives. And what I found out is that many people tend to allow minor details to become major distractions. We've allowed minor details to become major distractions. So the question today we must ask is, what is the rubbish that is in your life? what is the rubbish that is in your life? What is the junk? What is the trash that you've accumulated and now you're giving so much energy and committing so much time to? In the grand scheme of things, Nehemiah is saying it's a distraction. It's rubble. Pastor, I can't believe they said this about me. That's rubble. Pastor, somebody came to me and said that this person was talking about me. What do you think I should do about it? And what that person said determine your destiny. No, it's rubble. What are we giving priority to that really has no impact on your eternal security and the things that God is doing and has planned over your life? Yes, they didn't say hi, they didn't say bye, they didn't say thank you, but in the grand scheme of what God is doing in your life, it's rubble. And sometimes we give too much priority to the rubbish that's in our lives. So number one, we said fatigue leads to discouragement. Number two, frustration leads to discouragement. Number three, failure leads to discouragement. Failure leads to discouragement. Here, we're still in the passage, Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 10. Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there's so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. And basically what they're telling Nehemiah here is this, like, hey, we're tired, we're frustrated. As a matter of fact, I don't think we can even continue. So we might as well just give up right now. Because the bottom line is failure. I want us to kind of like understand what's really happening to these people here. In their mind, they have a projected time frame of how long this task is going to take. They have a projected time frame of how long it's going to take to rebuild these walls. In their mind, they have a projected timeline. It's going to take this amount of time. And what I've learned over the years is that when it comes to timing, God just always seems to have a different timetable than my time. Like, it just always seems to be different. It never makes sense because it never aligns up. And some of us are discouraged today as we look at our lives. It's December 2024. I should have been further along this year. December 2024, I should have accomplished more. It's December 2024. I did my vision board, and ain't nothing done. It's December 2024, and I'm still in the same place. And so you've got to ask yourself the question, is this my timeline, or is this God's timeline? Because more and more, I'm learning that God's timing really is best when it comes to the delays the things that we perceive as to be the delays of God. Because really, it's God positioning you for what he has in store for you. So we understand it as delay. No. God's like, no, you're on time. So I've always got to look. I've always got to see, how can I embrace what I consider to be a delay as divine? I've got to look and see, what is it that I need to learn from this year? Got to come to a place and ask, well, God, if it didn't happen the way I wanted to, or how I want it to happen, that must mean that you're up to something. I've got to resolve that in my mind. I've got to resolve that in my heart. If it didn't happen how I want it to happen, when I want it to happen, that must mean that you're up to something. And so, because they didn't finish the task as quickly as they wanted to, they started saying, I don't think we can finish this. I don't think we can continue. And the text really is displaying how their confidence is starting to plummet, how they're starting to lose heart, they're starting to get discouraged, they're ready to give up. The reality is, many of us will encounter various moments of how failure looks in our lives. We all will respond differently. But some of you guys, you just want to have a pity party. What was I thinking? I can't get this done. Why me? Others of you guys, you just want to complain. God, why? Why would you do this? Why would you allow this to happen? I can't believe you, God. And others of you, you just have this negative self-talk. Oh, what's wrong with me? I should have never stepped out. I should have never took the first step. I should have never tried this. Like, you stupid? Like, no one in your family has ever done this. Why would you even try? Why would you even attempt? You have all these negative self-talks happening in your head. There's another group of us. You just like pointing fingers and blaming everybody else but you. It was their fault. I know I didn't tell them, but it was their fault. They should have known. It was their fault. It was part of their responsibility. Family, what I realized is one of the biggest differences from people who get so discouraged that they're ready to give up and people who are willing to align themselves with God's best and God's will and God's timetable is that those who are ready to align themselves with God's will and God's purpose in their lives, they actually learn from their failure. They're willing to learn from their failures in life. While the rest of us, we want to run, we want to hide, we want to cancel everything, we want to give up, we want to give in, we want to do all those things. But what I will tell you today, failure will always lead to discouragement when you refuse to learn from it. It'll always lead to discouragement when you refuse to learn from what is God teaching me in this season. Like, this is the posture, this is the position you have to take. Yes, it didn't happen the way I wanted it to happen, when I wanted it to happen, but now I got to step back and ask, God, what is it that you're teaching me in this season? Because in this season, if you find yourself just fighting with discouragement, you got to ask yourself the question, are you learning or are you running? You got to ask, am I learning something or am I running from something? So, number one, fatigue leads to discouragement. Frustration leads to discouragement. Failure leads to discouragement. And lastly, number four, fear leads to discouragement. Fear leads to discouragement. Here, we're still in the passage, Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 11. It says, also our enemies said, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them, and we will kill them and put an end to the work. I want to make sure we have a full context of what's happening. Turn off? Right. They don't like the Jews. They don't want the Jews to rebuild the walls here. Because understand, when it comes to these walls being built, the walls, they represent safety. They represent defense. So it makes sense why they don't want these walls to be rebuilt. Because if there's no walls, then that means that the Jews will be vulnerable to attack. So the first thing that the Bible says that these enemies, they did is that they criticized the Jews. And when they criticized the Jews and realized that didn't work, then they ridiculed the Jews. And when they realized that criticism and ridicule didn't work, the final thing that they did was threaten the Jews. They said, if you do this, we'll come and kill you. If you build this wall, we're coming to take you out. And so right here, the workers, not only were they discouraged, but now they're scared. But let's look at who's scared. Verse 12. Then the Jews who lived near them, near the enemies, came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. They kept saying it. Wherever you turn, they will attack us. Wherever you turn, they will attack us. Friends, the Jews who lived near the enemy, they were the most scared, the most fearful. And I don't know if you caught what's happening right here. Because they were afraid and they were discouraged, now they started discouraging other people who were actually working. They go to the wall, they leave their home, they leave their residence, and they go to the wall to the people who are actually working. And they say, wherever you turn, the enemy's coming. Wherever you turn, the enemy's going to kill you. I'll make sure you get this. Because what's happening right here, what this is revealing right here, is letting us know that when you hang around negative people, negativity always has a tendency to rub off on you. When you hang around people who have nothing good to say, oh, that's not going to work. Man, you really believe God's going to make that happen? You really believe that that's going to take place? Guess what? When you hang around them, eventually you got to be careful because you'll start believing lies. You'll start believing the negativity. So you've got to ask yourself this question. When it comes to your biggest fears in this season right now, where did it come from? When it comes to your biggest fears in this season, at this very moment, where did it come from? Did it really come from you? Or did it actually come from the people who you gave too much access into your life? Did it really come from you? The negative thoughts that you have in your mind, did it really come from you? Or did you give access to people who really had no business speaking into your life? Did it really come from you? Or you hung around the wrong crowd for too long? Did it really come from you? Because the truth, family, fear will always discourage you. Fear is looking for friends. Fear is looking for friends. And so you've got to be honest with yourself and ask yourself the question, is my discouragement connected to fear? Is my discouragement, what I'm feeling in this season, what I'm feeling at this moment, is it connected to fear? Because whenever fear is in control of your life, you have this intense desire to just get away, this natural reaction to just run away from the demands of life and from the pressures of life. It's a natural reaction. I just want to get away. I just want to get out. I just want to run. Because in life, there are only three ways. There's only three flows of action. Three ways you can move in life. Number one, make sure you take. Is it working? All right, good. Number one, you can either move against something in anger, or you can move away from something in fear, or move with it in love. Three ways you can move in life. Against something in anger, away from it in fear, or with it in love. Three ways you can move. This is why the Apostle Paul, he tells Timothy, God didn't give you a spirit of fear. He didn't give it to you. So by process of elimination, if God did not give it to me, that means it must have come from only one place, and that's the enemy himself. And the main thing that the enemy is going to do with fear, he wants you to be afraid so that you run away from your purpose, you run away from the alignment of God's will and God's calling over your life. He just wants you to run. That's why he's throwing those arrows to discourage you. So now you're afraid of actually doing what you were called to do. Fear. So we got to understand, as we're moving throughout life, how am I flowing through life? Are you trying to move against stuff in anger? Trying to run away in fear? Are you moving with God in love? So these are the four things that's in this passage that the people of Israel, they bring up to Nehemiah. Hey, we're tired, we're frustrated, we have fear, we've experienced failure. These are the four things that they bring up. But I love how Nehemiah goes about this. Nehemiah does not leave the people that he's leading in discouragement. He doesn't leave them in discouragement because Nehemiah realizes this is God who called us to rebuild this temple, to rebuild this wall. So Nehemiah, he helps the people of Israel navigate through their discouragement. The next verse, Nehemiah 4, verse 13, says, therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places. That means the exposed places, that means there weren't nobody there before. Posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. That did not exist before. And so Nehemiah steps back and Nehemiah's like, we got to reorganize our plan. In order to fight discouragement, you got to reorganize the plan that you have. Nehemiah's like, hey, I understand. I hear you're discouraged. I hear that you're afraid, but here's what we're going to do. Hey, you go over here, you go in the low areas, you go on this side, you go on the other side of the wall, you go over there, you go over there, you go over there. We're going to do this completely different. Nehemiah says, hey, before you give up, reorganize. But before you throw in the towel, reorganize. But before you throw yourself in, reorganize, come up with a different plan. Because when you get discouraged, don't let quitting or giving up be your first option, but come up with a different plan, come up with a different strategy, come up with a different approach. When you get discouraged, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing the wrong thing. It doesn't mean that you're doing the wrong thing, because sometimes it might mean that you're doing the right thing. You're just going about it. And so here, the children of Israel, they're rebuilding this wall, which is the right thing to do. But Nehemiah comes to this place, and Nehemiah realizes, I know we've been doing it like this for some time, but it requires that in this season, in this moment, we got to reorganize. Because we're doing the right thing, but we're going about it the wrong way. Because it wasn't what we're doing that was the issue. It was how they were doing it. It was the way they were going about it. And friends, you and I, we need to understand this. That this is why when you are discouraged, your first response should not be, I need to give up. Your first response should not be, oh, well, I guess it's not going to work out. Let me just move on. Let me just leave. Let me just quit. Let me just give up. No, you got to take a step back. Because what I've realized is that discouragement tends to overreact. People who are discouraged, I want to quit this. I want to drop this. I want to do this. I'm just tired. I'm just going to give it all up. I'm just going to leave. People who are discouraged overreact. They act prematurely because they're ready to give it all away. But they haven't taken a step back. Let me think. Lord, is there a better way? Lord, is there another option? Open my eyes so I may see what you're doing behind the scenes. Lord, guide my path. Lord, show me the way. Show me, Lord. Lord, give me insight. Bring companions to me. Lord, direct my steps. Lord, show me. Because I can't see it with my own eyes. Is there another way? Because discouragement, it'll cause you to act prematurely, to think that this is the only option. You're discouraged in your marriage. Saying that it's over is not the only option. Oh, God, it was because you gave her to me. That's the only option. You got to take a step back and ask, is there another way? I know you're discouraged in your job or even in other areas of your job, but quitting, abandoning your post is not the option. Nehemiah says, we got to reorganize. We got to look at this differently. Is there an alternative? And the reason why Nehemiah says this is because Nehemiah understands that many of us, we're in the place that we're in, discouraged because of ourselves. Not anyone else, because of you. Your pride. You don't want to change. You don't want to look for another option. You don't want to look bad in front of people. No, we have to go a different path. We have to do something different. You're the reason why you're where you are. We keep ourselves discouraged. Because, yeah, you're doing the right thing, but you're going about it with the wrong approach and the wrong way. As I'm teaching today, I know some of us, we find ourselves where we're discouraged because we feel overwhelmed, we feel burdened by the pressures of work, by the pressures of family. You feel like your workload is just unbearable, it's unbelievable, it's just tremendous. All the pressure that's coming towards you, and I believe that the word for you today is just reorganize. Reorganize your time, reorganize your schedule, reorganize your approach, reorganize your finances, reorganize. That's what some of us got to do. As we're leading into 2025, reorganize. Because there's some things that we said yes to that you know you shouldn't have said yes to. There's some things you committed to you know you shouldn't commit to. And so now we're bringing on too much onto us. And what we should really be focusing on and doing with excellence, we can't even do it with excellence because we've committed to too many things. You got to reorganize. This is what the Pareto principle really illustrates for us, where we spend about 80% or 20% of the stuff that's not even causing us to be productive. And now you look at the end of the day, you look at the end of the month, or you come to December 2024, you're like, man, I didn't do nothing. I didn't accomplish nothing. I've been busy in the wrong things. But if we will focus 80% of our time on doing 20% of the things that will bring us a return on our investment in time, you would find yourself to be more productive in your family, in your business, in your life, in your career. We're focusing on the wrong things, the rubble. Nehemiah says, we got to reorganize. But then Nehemiah, he continues. Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 14. He says, you got to reorganize. But then number 2, he says, you've got to remember. You've got to remember. Verse 14, after I looked things over, I stood up and I said to the nobles, officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of the enemy. And the reason why he tells them not to be afraid, because the next sentence says, remember the Lord who is great and awesome. I love your word, God. Nehemiah says, I need you to remember the Lord. When you find yourself currently frustrated, currently discouraged, you got to allow it, and you got to make sure that it does not cause you to forget the God that you serve. You got to make sure that it causes you not to forget the God who has called you, the God who has saved you, the God who has delivered you. Nehemiah says, don't forget God. And what's interesting that I find is that there's a lot of us that when we enter into a season and we're like, Pastor, God is opening up doors for me. Pastor, God just laid this on my lap. Pastor, man, you can't believe what God is doing in the season right now. And you're confident, you really believe that this is God, like God is on the move. But the same people that will shout, that will dance, that will give God praise, the moment they get frustrated and discouraged, they're the first ones to leave. First one to quit. First one to give up. And then I'll see them maybe a few months or a few years later. Hey, how's that opportunity going? Pastor, you wouldn't believe, man. These people, they crazy. My boss, let me tell you about my boss. You were the same one who said, Pastor, look at this job that God gave me. Look at this relationship that God put me in. And now, the Lord who called you you find yourself in a place where now people is causing you to be frustrated outside of God's will that you said that God was calling you in? Was it God or was it not? Quick to give up, quick to leave. But here it is, Nehemiah says, I need you to remember the Lord. Remember the Lord. And when you remember the Lord, you don't allow discouragement and frustration to make you forget why God brought you there in the very first place. I know you're frustrated, I know you're discouraged, but you need to remember the goodness of God over your life. You need to intentionally pause and begin to think, man, God, I remember when I had no money in the account. I remember when I had no car to drive. I remember when my spouse left me. I remember when the kids were getting sick. God, I remember when they said they were going to come take the house. I remember when they came to get the car. I remember, and you turned it all around. I remember when I was lost in my sins and I was far away from church and I was on the verge of death. I didn't even come to church, but you came and pulled me out of my mess. You found me. I didn't find you. Who am I kidding? I didn't found you, but you found me. And you showed me the path, and I walked into church, and I sensed your grace. I sensed your love. I remember. Nehemiah says, you won't feel threatened if you just remember. I know what he said. I know what she said. I know what they said. I know what they planned. You won't feel threatened if you remember. If you know the God that you serve, you won't feel threatened. It won't bother you. It won't affect you. No, I still got joy. No. I ain't going to let this bother me. I ain't going to let this interrupt my day. I'm not going to let it interrupt my mood. I'm not going to let it affect my marriage. I'm not going to let it affect my life. No, because I remember. I'm not doing this by myself. I'm not doing this alone. I remember. No, it's not my strength. No, it's greater than he that's in me than he that's in the world. No, I remember. Do you know the God that you serve? Nehemiah says, I just need you to remember. Because once you remember, you don't even flinch. You don't even flinch. Because you know you're not by yourself. Nehemiah's like, I just need you to remember. I just need you to remember. I don't even know where I'm at. But then, we'll just go to the last one here. So he says, you got to reorganize. You got to remember. And the last thing, he says you need to resist. Here, Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 14. Nehemiah says, hey, after I looked things over, after we've reorganized things, we put people in the right place. We were okay with changing the plans for what needed to be done in this season. And then he says, remember the Lord who is great and awesome. Remember the God that you serve. Remember the God of your ancestors. He comes now and he says, the last thing he says, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters and your wives and your homes. Nehemiah says, I need you to get ready to fight for the things that matter to you. I know you feel like you want to give up, but I'm letting you know there's a fight on the inside of you. I know you feel like giving up. I know you hear the threat, and you're like, I don't know if I can do it. And Nehemiah's like, hey, I need you to get ready to fight. There's more that's in you. Get ready to fight. And I really appreciate this as a pastor, and I believe many of us who is a leader, who have people that we're responsible over, many of us who have responsibilities, we can attest to what Nehemiah is saying. Because it's not every day that I feel like I can fight. The discouragement has a way of just seeping in. I'll be honest, it's not every day I feel ready to preach. There's some days, some Sundays, I'm like, Lord, I'm going to need you for this one. I just realized Sunday comes every single week. Sunday comes every week. So regardless of how I feel, but regardless of what someone has said, I know for many of you guys, you might have to make decisions for just one or two individuals. I wish I could make a decision for just one individual in the church. I have to make decisions for 400 people. And so it's not every day, because everyone's always coming, hey, we need this, we got to get this. Woo! And so there's Sunday mornings, I got to pray myself out of bed. Pray myself to work. Pray myself to raise my kids. Pray myself to love my wife. Pray myself. I got to pray myself. There are days you may not feel like getting up because the discouragement has set in. But Nehemiah says, there's a fight in you. And I love it because Nehemiah takes it further. He says, if not for you, do it for the ones that you love. If not for you, do it for the ones that matter. If not for you, do it for your spouse. Do it for your son. Do it for your daughter. Do it for your household. We may not be related by blood, but these are some people that I love. The next generation. The people that God has given responsibility over. If not for you, do it for those that I've placed under your care. And what Nehemiah is trying to make sure that they understand, hey, I know you feel like giving up, but you don't have to give up. You don't have to give up. Because there's still more that's on the inside of you that has equipped you for the challenge that's up ahead. There's a story about Satan having a garage sale. Satan, he's selling the tools that he uses for centuries. Tools that he used, such as lying, hatred, malice, greed, jealousy, pride. He's selling these at his garage sale. But over in the corner, the most expensive tool that he has that cannot compare to all the stuff that he has in his garage, the most expensive tool, the most useful tool, the most impactful tool that he has is discouragement. This tool right here, he knows its impact. He knows its influence. He knows that it's deadly. And so, friends, what I want you guys to know is that the enemy may not get you to commit an immoral sin. He may not get you to trip up over the big stuff, the big sins we consider. He may not get you to cheat. He may not get you to lie. He may not get you to do any of those things. And the enemy says, I'm fine with that. Because if I at least can get them discouraged, if I can get them discouraged enough, then they'll walk out and do those things that I couldn't get them to do on my own. I don't need to tempt them. I just need to get them to a place where they're discouraged enough to give up, discouraged enough to give in, discouraged enough to throw in the towel. If I can get them to that place, then I've already taken care of what I need to take care of. Yeah, no, they can go to heaven all they want. That's secure. I can't do nothing about it. But here on this earth, they will not live the fulfilled and the best life in walking in their calling if they're discouraged. And Satan's like, I'm good with that. Let's all stand. Nehemiah, he comes to the people and he says, I need you to reorganize things. We need to reorganize things. As we're coming to an end in 2024, going in 2025, what is it that you need to reorganize? Some of us, when it's time for us to pray, we always come to God with this prayer list. God, I want this, 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 I want this. But sometimes, when you're praying, sometimes you just need to thank God for what he's already done. Just have the posture of remembering where God pulled you from, what God did in your life. And last, Nehemiah's like, I need you to know there's a fight on the inside of you. Your spouse may not know it, your kids may not know it, but the Holy Spirit is saying, there's a fight in you. I need you to accept it. I just need you to embrace it. I just need you to start training. I'm praying in the spiritual. I'm praying and I'm believing that God's going to work it out. No one may know. But in your prayer closet, you're waging war. Because there's still more on the inside of you. Gracious God, we thank you. Hallelujah. As we're ending this year, oh God, Father, I believe your people need to know that there's still more in them. This year's coming to an end. There's still more in them. There is still more in them. And Father, my prayer is that we would not end this year full with all the things that you've given to us to accomplish this year, oh God. But I pray, oh God, that we would use all the weapons, all the tools that you've given to us, oh God. Embrace your power. Embrace your wisdom. That we transition into this new year of 2025 submitted, aware of your sovereignty, embracing your strength. Thank you.